So I was really excited, as you can see, about this third anniversary, 3 years of Serverless Toronto user group, and then like 9 days ago, my mom passed away. Like she was almost 87, but like, and I lost the father before.
Sorry to hear
but
that.
But it really kind of hurts more when you lose both parents. And I just had to put this picture out and to wish them to rest in peace. And thank you, Mom and Dad. And now we're coming back to the regular meetup topic. So since we started serverless, Rupak remembers the definition of serverless has completely changed. When we started, it was purely about functions as service. We were backend developers, and we started enjoying gluing other people's API and services. And that felt like a kid's playing with these Lego pieces here. But then, like the easy backends gave superpowers to the front-end developers. So we started becoming friends with front-end guys. And it's not just front-end guys, it was UX folks, it was voice-first folks. And combined back-end and front-end, we started building MVPs faster and helping businesses move forward. So I noticed that over the last 2 years, members of our group became really connected and meshed well with product managers. Even this logo here is from the Lean product group from California that Dan Olson gave me right to use. So when you combine these 3 legs of the stool, you get agility. So to me, over the 3 years, serverless became new agile and new mindset because we are using bigger building blocks, smarter pieces, and less ops to help businesses faster. And on every meetup on this slide, I recommend the book or group to visit that's dedicated to building products faster. So, of course, this is a Lean product user group. You'll get the slides. You can click here. They have streams of unusual and really good meetups to inspire you. And the book of the year, to me, is a book, Ask Your Developer by Jeff Lawson from Twilio. Unlike other product managers and agile coaches, he does not make money from selling you the coaching. He built the company, and like they're huge success. Like just look at the news. So why I like the book, he exactly lives this principle that we are talking about, empowering developers. So like recommend this title to your managers and to executives, because unfortunately in IT, most of the change happens from the top down, not from the bottom up. But it can work this way, serverless mindset way of thinking. So now when you go about further defining what serverless mindset is, a couple of months ago, I had the same slide, but it was a really Sam Newman's talk at the conference where he was defining the serverless mindset similar way. And I was surprised in January 11th, there was a talk about government from Governor of Canada, Mark Brouillard. He's acting CIO and CTO. He was asked by Deloitte to give advice to students embarking into IT. And what he told them, that technology should never be an end by itself. So that's exactly like Sam Newman. That's like, it's a tool that helps support business problems and making people's lives better. And he also gave them advice to focus on the outcomes. That is exactly like our slide before, and to look at the big picture. So the metaphor I used, this part didn't change, is like if we compare ourselves to car mechanics. I've noticed over 33 years in IT that we too often enjoy keeping the cars in the garage and pimping them up. And business is waiting to be driven. So like the idea of serverless mindset is to focus more on driving business forward, taking them places than just pimping the cars and having fun for the fun of it. So that would be the mindset, but that leads into the further thing that, like sometimes people ask me, how do you start with functional services? I'm not in the cloud. You can apply serverless mindset to any tech stack, even in the data center. And like Ben Coy, he's from Roomba. He is one of the speakers and advocates about serverless. He says serverless is a state of mind, and it's about how you make decisions, not the choice, what choices you make. So there are links to all these talks here. When you get the slides, you can explore them and at least enjoy them. And in this enlightenment path, like path of the changing, evolving through the serverless, Rupak doesn't know that after you left us, we, for some reason, Manning Publications liked us, and they donate the books and courses at every meetup we have. So I want to thank them again. And at the end of this meetup, we're going to have a raffle. You have good odds to winning something and whatever you want. So So what's coming? What we're cooking for this year? Planned 2 meetups are planned. Like Azure is picking up in Canada, and there is nobody who can explain Azure like Barry to me personally. So I like learning from deltas. So the way Barry from Holland will talk about Azure will be breaking up the services, and you can map the cloud into the services that Azure has. And he's a plural site trainer, not just a consultant. So if you're prepared, if you happen to be in that cloud, and if you're preparing for AZ304 exam, I think he's the author of the training. So he's going to be a guest next month. And he also gave 30 vouchers, 30 vouchers for plural site, not just his courses. And we still think I have 12 slots left. So if you RSVP for the March meetup, you will be able to get 30-day free access to plural site. So that's exciting. And then in April, we're going to have an unusual talk. There was a startup to Milky Way. There is startup to Milky Way. And Sudeep, co-founder, wrote on internet that one morning he woke up with a 72,000 cloud bill. It was a scary experience. He managed to sort it out, but he's publicizing his experience, mistakes he made in the design. It was Google Cloud related, and how he changed the architecture and the lessons learned. So despite of it being Google Cloud specific, it's a scary experience that citizens of any cloud can benefit from. And we always need presenters. So far I had one volunteer. He wants to talk about Java on Amazon. So we did have, last talk was Java on Google. So probably we're gonna finalize the date for that talk. But if you have any ideas, ping me. We're going to talk. It cannot be, but you're already here. So for people listening, it cannot be self-promotion or company promotion. It has to be altruistic, like the guests we're going to have today. And so that's my intro. So the feature presentations, we have four guests today. Gareth is from Serverless Inc. And basically, so when we just started, Rupak was the one who adopted us, this group, and you started paying these bills. And 3 years later, we are still under your roof. But the company is so lightweight that I really wanted you to share the update to the community, what's happening, and just to be with us, because we are your children. And Kutz, as I mentioned at the beginning when we didn't record, did present here and a half ago and opened my eyes for Firebase. So I want to see how he's improving the website, the new architecture. So looking forward to learn the news. David, you have amazing topic, COVID-19 Vaccination Passport. Can't wait to learn. John, thank you for matchmaking introduction. And Mike, always welcome. This is your third talk at the user group, and you were here to support us at the first meetup in person. So thank you, everybody. Gareth, please take it away. You can take over the screen control at the bottom. So I'll stop presenting.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Apparently, I can only do entire screen, so we'll do that. And if anybody looking and seeing the not so great webcam, my apologies. It's really, I am currently on a machine I don't normally use, and that's because I have a little demo I have planned coming up after the talk, and I can't do it on any other machine but the one I'm on. So yeah, we'll just get to it. So yeah, as Daniel was saying, my talk is about how serverless has changed the software development process, and it kind of fits in quite nicely with what Daniel was talking about and serverless's impact by looking at the end goal and not the means necessarily. But before we get into that information, just a slight warning. It is early in the morning here, but there are children in the house, and it is possible that they may start screaming and shouting for mommy. So if that happens, I do apologize. And I also need to I just need to turn off my Bluetooth on the other headset. Sorry, folks. All right. Okay. So yeah, like I was trying to say, if you do hear screaming and shouting in the distance and children being murdered, don't worry, mommy's on the case. So it's all good. So this is me, obviously. My name is Gareth McCumskey. I'm a solutions architect at Serverless, and I've been with the company since about 2019 now. And I've been a developer for a number of years and started building serverless applications back in 2016. So yeah, it's been a little while for me. And I essentially work with serverless as not necessarily just a developer advocate, but trying to support developers using serverless and so on, speaking at meetups, assisting with support and so on. So let's just get into it. And you might be thinking, well, this topic sounds like something we've covered before in the past, the usual suspects, where we've discussed things like the fact that there's much less infrastructure management with something like serverless. It's not what we're covering today. Nor will we be talking about the accelerated time to market because of serverless technologies, making it a lot easier, or about the fact that you only pay for what you use. We all know about these features, and that's why we kind of use serverless a lot of the time. Or the fact that traffic management is often built into all of the services that we use to build our serverless applications. These are the usual suspects. We generally know about these. This is on the marketing pages. Kind of everybody knows about them. But there's other benefits of serverless that maybe not so apparent. And these are the types of things that we figured out now after years of building serverless applications. We've seen these benefits come down the pipeline. We've spent time working with teams at Serverless, helping other teams building serverless applications and seeing other benefits that folks are getting. And then experiencing ourselves. We obviously use serverless ourselves to build our own solutions and our own products. So we've also gained some of this experience ourselves. And to start off with, we're going to hop straight into looking at one of them, which I've just called closer to production. And this is mostly, and I want to compare the good old days versus how things are with serverless. And if you think about in the past, and to a large degree even today, a lot of development work happens by developing and testing locally. A lot of teams want to be able to develop their solutions locally and then only pushed into deployment environment when they're ready. And this can often cause some issues. Because after a few weeks, your team is going to do all this work and then they're going to get a release together. Then it gets tossed over the wall to the DevOps team, or back in the day, the system administrators, as we used to call them. And ultimately, the app gets deployed and everything breaks because it's been so long since we've had a release that the difference between the two environments is so vast that now we don't have any, it all just gets destroyed at this point. Now, there's obviously teams today that are trying to move towards a more constant release model. It is gaining traction, but it is still a difficult thing to do when you're based around a model using virtual machines or containers in a Kubernetes environment. There's a lack of agility there that lets you really move quickly in deploying well in those situations. But what serverless does is it gives us a way to solve this because looking at the way that we can develop with serverless applications, because we are using cloud services so extensively, emulating locally is actually kind of a difficult task to do. And this is a little bit of a silver lining. A better development model often with serverless development is that you push changes to the cloud and test there. And we've seen a lot of teams work very, very hard to try and do a lot of emulation of serverless services and so on locally, only to test to the cloud and find out there's more problems there that they need to solve because they weren't quite close enough to production. So that's why the model of coding and building locally and then deploying into the cloud to test often works out better. And I do hear from a lot of folks that the concern is that this will slow down development. But even internally, we found that often this ends up speeding up development because you're pushing yourself that much closer to your production equivalent environment. And it actually ends up saving time in the long run. Because at the end of the day, you are essentially on production at that point. There is no different environment. There's no different machines. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why developing locally might not be as good as pushing to the cloud. And there's just a list of some of them. Things like using IAM on AWS. You can't really replicate IAM properly, and that often creates a stumbling block for folks if they're developing locally. There's latencies and concurrency issues with the services that we use that you're not going to see with emulating locally. And things like API validations and so on using the AWS SDK, for example, is going to end up causing a problem too. And there's a bunch more. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. And if anybody really wants to go into discussion about the local development stuff, feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to have a chat. And for folks who are concerned about developing locally, writing your Lambda function and then having to wait for that, 1 to 2 minute deploy. There's a quick little tip if you're not aware. There's a serverless deploy function command, which you can use to essentially deploy just the Lambda function itself. If you've made code changes and infrastructure changes, you can use this command, and that only deploys the actual function itself and takes 3-4 seconds. So it's a nice quick way to write code, push to cloud, test. Right, so number 2 on the list. Lambda is kind of forgiving of bad code. And if you think about the past, we would have to put up with writing bad code, and I put that in quotes because it's kind of subjective what we mean by bad code. But generally, you can have code that can bring down an entire application. Not very difficult to do. And this is primarily because you often have shared resources between threads. If you have 100,000 requests all coming to the same machine or a virtual machine, those resources are shared, and one of those threads consumes all the CPU or memory, and suddenly everybody is affected negatively through that. Clustering helps, even in the case of containers, Kubernetes, multiple VMs, load balancing, and so on. This can help ameliorate that to some degree, but ultimately, a bad code like that can affect all the machines in your environment, and you can end up scaling way higher than you need to try and compensate. And like I was saying, containerization only helps so much because it doesn't fully isolate bad code from a machine that is executing that code. But in serverless, this ends up sort of being almost a non-problem. A single Lambda function executes within its own context, and this is similar to some of the other vendors as well. But your Lambda function essentially executes in its own environment that is kind of locked off CPU and memory-wise from other Lambda functions in the environment. There are also, of course, our built-in timeouts. So you can, for example, Serverless sets a default of 6 seconds on Lambda functions. So you can have timeouts built in deliberately to stop runaway functions from costing you money. And we've had folks in the community actually test the noisy neighbor effects of Lambda functions on other Lambda functions. And there is some effect, there's no denying that, but the effects have been found to be minimal. When you try to push a single Lambda function incredibly hard, doing highly compute-intensive work, the effect on neighboring Lambdas is minimal, plus you've got your timeouts and ways to mitigate that. And obviously here, it's the ephemeral nature of Lambda that's the real savior. If you have runaway processes in a single Lambda function, the fact that the Lambda functions are spun up and spun down and broken down, they're not pets, we're not looking after them, they're not our treasured objects. It doesn't matter. Something can go wrong, you can destroy it, you can push an update and have those Lambda functions instantly destroyed and new versions deployed. The ephemeral nature really assists us with this. And ultimately what this means in business value as well, this has great business value because in the good old days, we would have to have a lot of focus on optimization. I've spent so much time in the past working on optimizing code we've written to work on hardware that actually that can't handle what we're pushing at it. Instead, with the serverless environment, the business can now rather have developers working on pushing features out there instead of worrying about optimizing all the time, and rather build value for the company. All right, this is a slight. For some reason, this ends up being a slightly more contentious topic, but the idea that less code is less errors, and the whole idea is, I mean, if you think about the past when you're building serverless applications, and I've used a web application as an example because it's what I'm most familiar with. If you think about in the past when you were building a web application, you'd have to do all the processing of that HTTP request in code, and pretty much that means everything from the routing on the URL paths, the authentication calls, responses, HTTP responses, and everything else, file system access. All of these things would have to be expressed in code in some way. And ultimately, code ends up being the weak point for applications. And all of this means that you have a lot more code that needs to be written in order to incorporate all these features or included in your application as part of a framework that bundles and tries to solve these problems for you. And code ends up being the single largest cause of failures in platform. And this is probably why a lot of these low or no code solutions we've been seeing out there are getting very popular, serverless included, because teams have realized that the more code you write, the more bugs you create, the more maintenance there is, the more work there is, and it becomes harder to manage. And serverless gives us really great ways to actually mitigate a lot of the code that we use on a regular basis. So, for example, API Gateway handles pathing, calls, and responses. There's very little you need to do to the actual HTTP request. In fact, a Lambda function doesn't even need to know that it's handling an HTTP request. You return an object, from your function, an API gateway turns that into an HTTP response. You receive an event object, and it happens to contain HTTP request data. It's pretty awesome how that there's no code that you need to write to manage that HTTP request. DynamoDB, while I know it can be a tricky data store to use at times, if you think about how you interact with DynamoDB, there's no complex ORM that you might need to incorporate. It ends up being a relatively simple database to interact with because it is just the AWS SDK. You're just passing a single object to the SDK and receiving results. There's very little code that needs to be incorporated to help you make use of DynamoDB or similar data stores even. If you think about S3, for example, S3 is a fantastic replacement for the file system. You don't need to worry about file system interactions that could potentially go wrong. You can just put files into S3. You can just retrieve them back out again. It's a great way to handle your files. And even if you look at frameworks, and it's not just the serverless framework, but in general, frameworks around serverless tend to not add additional code to your application. When you deploy with the serverless framework, for example, the framework doesn't add another library, another chunk of code to handle stuff. It's essentially just deploying infrastructure into AWS for you, and that's all it does. All the code that goes into AWS is what you wrote as Lambda functions. And number 4, continuous delivery ends up being much easier to do. And if you, again, going back to the good old days, if we think about the first slide, releases that you toss over the wall because the dev team's now got a release to get out. This kind of interaction ends up actually creating friction between your infrastructure teams and developers. Because the infrastructure team keeps telling developers you should be building things this way. The developers try to do that and have to test locally. And it's difficult to meet in the middle somewhere because they're talking 2 different languages. And this ends up leading to these big bang releases with a ton of changes that often have issues and bugs in them because just of the huge quantity of changes that get incorporated. This is obviously one of these situations that has started changing a lot recently. There's a lot more teams working in ways to make regular releases more possible. But it is a tricky thing to do in the traditional development model because you still have to worry about the infrastructure you're going to be deploying on. Whereas with serverless, as we'll see, this becomes a bit easier to deal with. And yeah, that's exactly like I was saying, the biggest cause is often that the slow rollout of infrastructure changes causes issues when you're trying to push out new features. As a developer, you'll be wanting to use the latest and greatest of the infrastructure that you can. But if you're relying on a traditional method to roll that infrastructure out, it's going to delay you in getting the features that you want. So you'll learn to live without what might do the job a lot better. And in serverless, this becomes a lot easier because this is all about the infrastructure is part of the service. So the developer isn't thinking about developing locally and hoping that it's going to work when it gets deployed into production. What you build is what is going into production. You are deploying into production as you're building things. Your changes that you make as a developer can be pushed into production. I should have put that in quotes. With a single command, you can push to a dev environment that will test that for you. It's a lot easier to make sure that what you're developing actually works. And this can be even just a merge to GitHub. There are a lot of CI/CD tools you can use to take merges into a GitHub branch and push that into a develop environment or a production environment. And we've often found that teams using serverless tend to go for the microservice model of development. And this specific model helps reduce the surface area of changes you're making. So even if you're deploying your service on its own, because it's a self-contained microservice that doesn't necessarily affect other services, the surface area of change is so small that there's very little risk of deploying this. And that makes automation with CI/CD a relatively simple task. Even at serverless, if you use our serverless dashboard, we have a CI/CD tool that helps you deploy your code and infrastructure out really easily and quickly. Makes life a lot easier. So that's the quick presentation. But I asked Daniel at the last minute, and this only came up a couple hours ago, whether I could demo something at the meetup as well, because I don't know if we want to take questions now or after, and if anybody's talking to me, I can't tell because my Bluetooth headset isn't working.
So you want the questions now or demo now? Like,
1 sec. Let me just stop sharing quickly. Let me fix the sound quickly, Daniel. Sorry.
okay, can you hear me?
and I can hear everybody. Yay.
Okay. So you can do the demo now, and then we can either, like, it's very late where you are, so you can stay until the end, or we can ask questions now, or finish the demo, and then there will be a bigger variety of questions.
All right, let's just do the demo quickly. It shouldn't take long, but it's a pretty exciting thing that we've been doing at Serverless. You guys can see now. There we go. You're presenting. All right. So if anybody is on the Serverless Slack, so if you know what I'm talking about, serverless.com/Slack. It's a community Slack workspace that we've had set up for years now that anybody can go to, ask questions, get help from the community if you're busy on something and you don't know what you're looking for information on something. We announced what you're seeing on the screen now in that Serverless Slack, and this is Serverless Desktop, and it's something we've been working on sort of secretly in the background as an MVP, and it's now to the stage where it's beta. So massive caveats right now. This is massively in beta. This is our first release out of internal alpha testing, so this probably will have bugs. This will probably not be perfect as we want it to be. The interface will probably change, blah, 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 the usual stuff. Don't take this as gospel, what you're seeing here, or even if you try it out yourself, anybody can try it out now. So caveat over. So really, the whole idea of Serverless Desktop, the short rundown before we really get into it, is our aim is to try and make serverless development as easy as possible. And one of the ways we've realized this is difficult is when you're developing, as I mentioned, in the cloud, testing and working with your cloud deployed services as a developer or in production even can be a bit tricky to do sometimes, especially because it's nice to have a unified way of looking at your infrastructure that you've deployed. And Serverless Desktop is aiming to try and be there, to try and make that development experience a lot nicer. So what you're seeing on the screen here is just after I've connected. So what I can do is once I log into my Serverless account on the desktop app, I can connect to my AWS account using a connect button that you'd see on the screen when you first started. I'm not going to go through the whole connect process. I can break my connection here and create a new connection if I wanted to. All the details about what is involved in this connection is in the GitHub repo linked in the Serverless Slack, and we could probably drop that in the chat as well. That's just github.com/serverless/desktop. So I don't know if we could put that in chat, but yeah, it should be there. Okay. And this is completely unscripted. I have not had a chance to properly put together a nice demo. I'm just kind of showing off some features. So please, everyone's patience as well. Okay. So I'm connected to AWS, and what has happened since I've connected is that the desktop will automatically look through my CloudFormation stacks for serverless framework projects I've deployed in my AWS account, and that's what we're seeing on the side here. These are separate CloudFormation stacks related to serverless framework. I have a whole bunch of other CloudFormation stacks that aren't shown yet because they're not serverless framework related, so that's why we're only seeing these. And what I want to do is I want to go into a specific stack here, this Bring Me Biz affiliate, for example. And what this is going to show me is I've got a bunch of Lambda functions here that I've deployed. There is a DynamoDB table associated with the service. And this is a single serverless service deployed with a serverless.yaml file containing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Lambda functions. And each of these is that one isn't. Each of these is, well, most of these are APIs. So you can see here, he has an API endpoint to create an affiliate. He has one to delete and get. So now I've got access to these. I also have access to my S3 buckets associated with the service. So I can go and take a look at anything that might be in this S3 bucket. Yeah, so all my stuff here is all here together. My DynamoDB table, I can actually query this to see what data. I don't have any data, but we'll change that in a second. So if I could just quickly go into my create affiliate, I want to add some data in. I can come to the post affiliate here and start putting in my data. I've got a saved test here that I've been using. And what this allows me to do is, for example, set a body. So I've got my JSON body here that allows me to send data, an HTTP request to my Lambda function, which I can now send. And I think I have a console log, but I may have taken it away. What you can see here is I've got something called log streaming enabled. So when I actually when I select this for the first time, Serverless Desktop is going to add the ability for log streaming to this specific Lambda function. So as I'm testing here, if I have console logs or any data being logged out of my Lambda function, it'll show up in the log here. So just as I send requests, there you can see now it's logging out some data. There it's logging out my data for me. So this is showing me anything that I might have logged out of my Lambda function as a way to test things in that way. I believe I've got a get affiliate here that I can get. I'm just going to leave that because I don't have that set up. Actually, I might be able to just grab key 2. Do a get affiliate. No, I can't. No, I'm going to. You can see it's enabling the log streaming. So I haven't used this specific HTTP endpoint yet, but it's enabling log streaming right now. And once that's done, as I'm sending tests, it'll log out the any console logs I may have there. Yeah, and now that I've used the post request a couple of times, I can come to my Lambda function, my DynamoDB table, and send a scan there. And you can see there's the data that I just posted into my DynamoDB table returned to me. I can actually perform specific queries if I wanted to as well against the keys that were created in my DynamoDB table. And this demo doesn't do it justice. I've been trying to use this as a way for me to help develop this this API that I've been putting together. And really, it's to help just to help workflow of serverless development. And I'm going to leave it there and let everybody have the opportunity to go and try out Serverless Desktop themselves. Let it pull your serverless stacks into your serverless framework stacks into desktop, and give that a try. I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you.
So if anybody has questions, I guess now is the time.
Can you paste the link?
Yes, I will do that. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Folks, any questions? Or are we going to leave them for the end? Comments?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I wanted to know from serverless perspective that what are the challenges for going serverless?
So what are the challenges of? I missed the last part, sorry.
Going serverless.
Oh, the challenges. So the biggest challenges we've seen from most teams is an educational one. And what usually helps is if you do have a team that is really good with AWS, that knows sort of cloud infrastructure and that sort of things, that education barrier is eased somewhat. But serverless development often requires a bit of a different way of thinking about building applications because you're no longer building the same way anymore. There's some differences that often need to be incorporated. So the biggest challenges we see is often educational with your team of developers and so on.
Just correct my understanding. What I'm not that conversant with serverless and still learning. But are there any restrictions from the execution time and the payload perspective, which which poses concerns in terms of bad jobs or maybe large volume of file streamings, APIs written in serverless?
So that's the interesting thing. When you're building your application with serverless, you've got this huge breadth and depth of services available to you from the cloud vendor. And to be fair to all the vendors, AWS is the one leading the pack at the moment with serverless services. It's just the state of things at the moment. And what you'll find is that a lot of teams will use services. So you talk about file streaming, for example. Traditionally, you'd write an application that will receive binary data through HTTP requests. Whereas if you're building a serverless application, you're often going to do this using S3, which is a service specifically designed to help you manage things like large volumes of uploads. If you're looking for managing large volumes of queries or messages coming into a service, there are tools like Kinesis, SQS, and so on that help you manage incoming data, large volumes of incoming data, and the Lambda functions or the compute side of things can handle that at leisure when it has the opportunity to. So that goes back to what I was talking about, the educational side of things, where getting on-ramped on these tools available to you in the cloud completely changed the way often a lot of the times you need to think about solving these problems. Hope that helps.
Yeah, so, if Amazon wants to add anything, but I would keep our questions now focused on the topic of the talk itself. And then we can, during the Q&A at the end, everybody can chip in and answer generic serverless questions. So I was a little bit confused about the tool. Like, is it for offline development or a wrapper? Like, what is the benefit? Why would I want to use it?
Well, like I mentioned in my talk as well, is that we often find developing and testing in the cloud is often a easier way to manage development of serverless in the long term, because you're not replicating locally and potentially not replicating completely. So when you do eventually deploy, things don't work the way you intend. Happens to me all the time when I kept trying to write my Lambda functions locally. So what Serverless Desktop does, the desktop app that you saw, is allow me to write my code locally, push it into AWS, and then test it using Serverless Desktop. I can send the query to the Lambda function in my AWS account, as opposed to a simulated AWS sitting on my local machine that may or may not have IAM, latency, DynamoDB, all these other things I may need running locally.
Fair. Sorry, I missed that. Any other questions before we move to the next?
Yeah,
Anybody else?
One quick one. So, what kind of credential do you need for running the desktop? I'm gonna try it anyway. But do you need console access or just programmatic access?
David, I couldn't hear
you. I did hear I understand the question. The GitHub does mention this as well. So if anybody wants more detail, you can see it there too. At the moment, Serverless Desktop, what it does is when it connects to AWS, at the moment it creates an admin account to access your AWS account. Our plan is to reduce that because we are in the beta phase and we're trying to still add the features we want, the additional features we want. We need to keep that slightly open just for this sort of testing phase of things, very much in beta. Ultimately, the plan is to have a very small set of permissions that get created in AWS for the bare necessities that desktop uses. And over time, as you use more features in desktop, it'll prompt you to add more permissions to the AWS account. That's something we've discussed exhaustively internally that we want to make sure comes into desktop at full release.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. This is Rupak. I had a quick question. Are you guys still using components under the covers, or this is plain without components?
We are definitely using components. A lot of our platform uses a lot of collection of microservices, and a lot of those are being deployed using the Express component, for example. I believe our website's going to be redeployed using the website component soon, but we do use it quite extensively. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we should probably move along, Daniel, and then we'll come back with more questions on that if we need to.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Daniel and Jonathan, for letting me have a chat.
That was excellent. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you. Kutz, you want to take over the screen? You can stop presenting, Gareth. Like you have to stop, I think, and Kutz can take over.
I thought I had.
Okay. Good. My bad.
Okay. All right. You can see my screen?
Yep.
Sure.
Coming up.
All right. Yeah, so thank you guys for this opportunity again. So my name is Kutz, and today I'm just going to be discussing some serverless updates that I made to my platform. For those who were not there the last time that I gave a talk, I pretty much just discussed about the project that I'm working on, which is a music streaming platform like Spotify and Apple Music. It allows people to stream African music. Right now, we're just starting with Zimbabwean music, but you're able to access this platform over the web, and you're also able, as of January, you're able to access it through the Android application. So in the beginning, did not have too much technical expertise in software. I just wanted to get the product up and running as quickly as possible, but as lean as possible, without having to invest too much money, and money in the sense that I'd have to get some developers to build this robust infrastructure for me. So that's where I jumped into Firebase. Firebase allowed me to very quickly build an application, a web application, and host it free of charge, and with very with no stress, pretty much. So for Firebase, we're using the hosting service, and we're also using the database service that they had, as well as the cloud functions, which are pretty much the same thing as Lambda functions in AWS, excluding the gateways and all that other stuff. So yeah. So recently, I have made as well as growing the platform and other business concerns, I have been making some technical updates as every other month as we go on, and some of the big updates that I made were on the architecture side. So I'll just quickly discuss where we're at right now. So at the moment, there are 3 web applications. One is for listening to music. The other one is for artists. They're able to log in, create their accounts, manage their music, make uploads, and also manage their billing and track their metrics. The other platform is internally that I use and my other teammate. We use that to make music uploads, manage customer support, chats, creating ads for the platform. And sometimes our artists don't have the opportunity to, being that it's in Africa, some people, it's a bit expensive on the data side. So some people might not have access to upload, say, 40 songs or their entire catalog. So we take that task up for them and we upload that music up for them. So we also have our own dashboard that we use. At the moment, we have 5,000 weekly users. That is people who've registered accounts and are coming in on a weekly basis and downloading music. That number goes up and down, but on average, it's about 5,000 weekly. And I'm expecting that to go up now since we have that Android application just released. Yeah. So one of the things that we've recently implemented was Cloud Run, which is what I'm going to be talking about, as well as the Firebase stuff that we're doing. I really recently implemented Cloud Run, and the reason for that was I was really trying to decouple our application code from the backend code. When you deploy to Firebase hosting and you use the web SDK, very quickly you find that your application code will be very tightly coupled with the backend code, your database requests, your function requests. It's so tied up, and now as the application starts to grow, being a team of 2 people, when you want to make a change or you want to make a feature update or introduce new features to the application, you most likely end up having to touch 20 different other things. And over time, if you have 10 features, 10 times 20, it becomes a mess. You end up going into rabbit holes that you just can't escape. So it became evident to me that we really needed to decouple our applications and separate them into 2 layers, essentially having an application layer and a microservices layer. Being serverless, the entire backend is just microservices. So Cloud Run was really helpful in this part. So essentially all of those web apps that I discussed, we now, in the beginning, it was just one big application and you could just access the different platforms on different endpoints. Now what we did was we separated each application and we deployed it as its own container, but then we deployed it onto Cloud Run. Essentially how that works is you just make a commit to a GitHub repository, and then that triggers Google Cloud Build to wrap that application that you've just committed to GitHub, and then it deploys it onto Cloud Run, and you can now access that application through HTTP. So we've done that for all 3 of our applications. So now it makes making changes, especially doing bugs, debugging, makes it very easier to manage those applications. You don't have to work with this big monolithic application. And also, as you introduce new features, it also becomes more scary to break stuff since there's a lot of people using it. And next is delivery or build automation. And I say that very lightly. I know there's more robust tools out there, but another thing was when I was building these applications as the sole developer, there's just so many of these little manual tasks that you're doing for each little update, for each little deploys. You have all these little deploy scripts. Cloud Run now allowed me to kind of automate that process. Again, using GitHub, all I have to do is when I make a feature update or I'm fixing some bugs, I push that code up to GitHub, and that cloud build, I can also use that Google Cloud build to essentially run those tests for me, to run tests to see if the code passes, if there's any issues. If the tests do pass, it deploys it to some staging environment in Cloud Run. If there was like a Scrum Master, they'll be able to take a look at that code, take a look at the application itself to see if everything is running well before it gets published to a production environment. So again, this is solely to do with the build process. There's a lot of little steps in there that I have to go through that we're able to now automate for each of the 3 apps. And recently, with the Android app coming out, we'll also implemented a process for compiling the application, building it, and then deploying it up to the Play Store to a staging environment for internal testing. And that's very interesting. When you add up all these little time constraints that you've now cut out, you actually save a lot of time, and it makes it very easy now to, as Gareth was saying, you get closer to that production state, and you're able to do things a bit more quicker. And as the product grows, there's going to be new teammates coming in. So the idea of developing everything locally, we're trying to move away from that and just have everything remote. The code is cleaner. It makes it easier to introduce more stuff. If you're able to do more, implement things much quicker, you don't have those gaps that you were talking about where you have 3 weeks where you haven't updated anything, and everybody pushes updates at once, and then things break, and then traversing that issue is something else that you don't want to go into. And then also rolling out new features again on this issue of features. Whenever I release a new feature, it does, and I'm happy with it, and I've tested it out and it works, and it's past that staging environment. I don't necessarily want to push these changes to 100% of the traffic. I still want to continuously check to see how people are responding to it, see how that feature scales out as more people use it. Cloud Run essentially allows you to do these little canary releases where you push out those changes. You can actually roll out that function to say 10% of your traffic. And then over time, you can increase that to say 20%, 30%. And if it's not working, you can just completely roll it back out to 0 and keep the old state that was there before. With Firebase hosting, as good as it is, you can't really, there's no real way of doing that, managing those rollouts. If you're pushing new update, it's going 100% to the traffic. It's going to the 100% of your traffic. So that was very good because at least I can have 10 features that are new, and I can be tracking them through metrics, tracking errors to see how everything is. And then if I'm happy with it, I can then fully roll it out. And finally is I've implemented what they call cloud workflows. I recently only found out about this, but it's been very nice being a serverless based platform in terms of how we operate. We tend to have a lot of microservices or functions behind the scenes. Some of them are talking to each other. I have functions that I have services that literally talk, they talk to 4 or 5 other microservices, and it really becomes a mess trying to orchestrate that. So the cloud workflows platform is very, very neat. It's a single dashboard where you can use a YAML file to describe all the steps that are going into this task that you want. And what I mean here is, for example, we might have a function whenever someone purchases a new monthly subscription, for example. There's a couple of steps that are involved in that on the back end. The first one is we send a request to the billing function that does all, and that's a big function of its own. It does whatever it needs to do. And then the next thing that happens after that is you need to handle the accounting services. So doing all your journal entries, all the financial stuff, there's a function that does that. That's a big thing on its own. The next thing after all that is done is we send out an invoice once all of that stuff is done. If you're handling 40, 50 microservices, it can become a mess to kind of organize that stuff. And with workflows, you're able to kind of describe these little workflows. Say, okay, this is my billing workflow. This is step 1, step 2, step 3. And you don't have to have that in your code. Because once again, if by doing that, you're tightly coupling your code again. If something happens in the function that's running all those little tasks, or if that breaks, that's another thing that you have to look into. Whereas here, it's not coupled with that. Each function can only focus on what it needs to do, and then you can separate that workflow. It kind of promotes that whole modular-based, component-based architecture. So yeah, with that said, I didn't have any demos today. I tried to keep it as short as possible. Hopefully that made sense. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah. And you can also access the website at this link here.
Paste it in the chat as well. Wow. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I did not know where you're going to lead with this, but you pivoted again. I expected something Firebase, and you revamped everything into new technologies and giving us more ideas what to play with. So thank you for sharing that. And I have a question about the Android app. Like, I think originally, like, the app worked on the phones. Why did you step away from TWA into Android, and why only Android?
Because of that whole, I think you're limited in terms of features with the PWAs, because essentially people want to download music and keep it offline, and we don't want people moving outside of the app because we want to make that revenue, right? So we have to keep them within the app. PWA is essentially just a web app on your homepage. You don't have that native functionality. Many of our users, they come online at the time of downloading music, and then they go back offline. So the PWA is not really helpful in that, because we're saving songs, we're tracking metrics, and when they come back online, we push that information up. With the PWA, we really don't have access to the native side of things. So we really had to go down to the Android part, and soon we're coming out with iOS as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions? You should watch the old talk as well, and this is kind of add-on, icing on the cake. Any other questions for Kutz?
Kutz, I had a quick question. So you mentioned containers, and then you also mentioned serverless functions. So do you actually integrate both of them? Like, do you call your container code from functions, or the other way around?
No, so because it's all accessible through an endpoint, we can just call it directly. So what I have is I have a main, essentially it's like a server, a Node.js server, where that's the one thing that all the apps interact with, and then that pushes traffic to the rest of it. It's almost like it's a little gateway between all the underlying APIs. The apps don't interact directly with yeah.
All right, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? So thank you for sharing that.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Kutz.
Thank you. John, you want to introduce Dave?
Yeah, I can give a quick introduction to David. Tonight is the first time I've actually met David face to face, but we met indirectly over in the Toronto JavaScript forum. And I saw what he had posted as far as the current project he's on, looking at these vaccination passports. And I thought it was a great opportunity to have him join us tonight to share with us what he's working on. First of all, it's very relevant to obviously all of us in this upside down world we find ourselves in. Vaccination passports obviously becoming something that we're thinking about, and who knows in the future what restrictions are going to be in place as far as we need to, to travel or to enter a sporting event or whatever. This is all going to be thrust upon us. And secondly, it's great to see a project with a greater moral purpose like this, as opposed to, you see so many, social media, the next big thing, or it's Uber for toboggans or whatever. Like, this is actually great moral purpose, and it's a pleasure to have you, David. So please take the stage.
All right, I will. A window. Let's try that. Brave browser would like to record this computer screen. Open system preferences. I apologize. We probably should have allow. There we go. Click on the left. Okay. Do this. I apologize for that.
No problem. So present now button is bottom right.
Yeah, it's just that I switched over to Brave because I'm becoming more and more. Brave browser will not be.
Browser.
Yeah, okay. He's probably just going to join back in. Browsers have like the operating system level permission.
I see. I don't know. I don't experiment much, and Chrome and Firebase.
Well, I think it's fussier on the Mac OS too. I'm not sure. Oh, here he comes.
Hi.
It restarted the browser on me. So Brave browser is, and I know this is off topic, but I guess it's kind of all off topic to some degree. It's a clone of Chrome done by Brendan Eich, which is the inventor of JavaScript, and it's a highly I've becoming very, very kind of paranoid. I don't know what the word is. So I try to minimize my Google services. I try to minimize information leakage to the web. So I use DuckDuckGo for search, and it's worth a try. It basically looks like Chrome, but it kind of hides more of your identity as you go toward web pages, and tries to strips out things like anything that's passing through URLs that might be passing secrets. Tries to get rid of them. So
let's see if it works.
Let's see if it works this time. Okay, a window.
Bottom right, present now, and you can share the full screen. It's easier because sometimes with Windows.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Share.
There we go.
It works. Okay, I will add it to the list of supported browsers because people could not join with Edge.
Okay, so there you go. But they had to set it up beforehand. So maybe we should have done the little test beforehand. But so all you guys see what I'm seeing? You see consensus information passports?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, awesome. So so it's not just the concept of vaccine. I'm probably going to end up repeating things along these slides, but we'll make it. Actually, I'm going to run a little timer here just so I know that I'm not going over or under. So the concept is that a vaccination passport is basically digital proof that you got a vaccination. Right now, to travel to certain places in Africa, you need I believe, a yellow fever vaccination card. This kind of generalizes the concept. There's a lot of social and soft issues around this, which I won't go into, but they're well discussed online. Where there is a real need immediately right now in Ontario is not necessarily vaccination passports, but passports that, and we're just calling it a passport, but something records the fact that you've got a test done because for COVID, because for a doctor to go from a hospital to a long-term LTHC requires that they be tested every 3 days. And it's actually a paperwork nightmare for everyone. But when you get to the more things like traveling internationally or traveling between certain provinces, the issue, of course, is people might start faking credentials. And what we propose here, this is all built on, this is standing on the shoulders of giant stuff. But we're presenting a system here that basically verifies, makes it very, very difficult to do fraudulent things. So vaccination and test passports, it's digital proof. And our goals are, and this is actually, I'm totally selfish in this. I want to see my parents again. My parents are very old. They live in Newfoundland. I need to see my sister. I got to get my daughter out of the house. I need to get into a bar. You know, this, all the usual things is I want to accelerate various things happening in society. And so this, I started with some other initiative earlier in the year. This is my current thing. I think there's lots of people are discussing it. There's a number of private initiatives doing it, but I think doing it with open source and open standards is the way to go. Sociological issues we just discussed. It's a type of verifiable credential. A verifiable credential is something that the World Wide Web Consortium has introduced, and it's very complex and very simple at the same time, but basically it's a way of you can pass your grades, to someone, show your grades, or that you proof that you're old enough to buy a bottle of booze, anything like that. And there's various ways of doing these with zero knowledge proofs and things like that. But it's a broad standard, but this is a type of verifiable credentials. And everyone working in the space is using the WC3 verifiable credential system. They don't tell you how they're using it, but they say they're using it. Information passports is our spin on this. And it has certain goals, and one of them is to minimize centralization, and this gets into minimize creepiness. I believe this type of system is going to come into existence. And so I'm 3 minutes in, and I'm already at 3 slides. Minimize, but that I'm really worried that people are going to set up a system where all your information is going to be in one spot. And I want to set up a system where either you have your own information or your information is distributed over many, many spots so people can correlate it. It wants to minimize, which is supposed to be minimize, interactions, which is just basically saying it's easy to use. And I was actually just reading something on Town and Country magazine, of all things, that basically it has to be understandable by everyone. These types of systems have to be dirt simple to use. There we go. It has to be built on existing web standards. If you're not familiar with these, I can answer questions about them. JSON-LD is JSON with semantics, verifiable credentials. Schema.org. If you go look at the source of web pages on any news site, you'll see schema.org stuff. It's a modeling system. It's basically a set of names for naming things in the world. And X509 is what runs your SSH and things like that. It's public private key cryptography. Here was what is a claim. Examples is, so with vaccinations, the current vaccinations, you require 2 vaccinations. So one of them is I received a second. These are claims that I could make. I received a second Moderna vaccination on a date. David James has had the viral test for COVID-19 on January 3rd. I graduated from Memorial University in 1987. I was the president of IBM Canada. I won the silver medal in the biathlon in 2004. Some of those are true. Not all of them are, though. But this is the point of having verifiable credentials, is you're not just making a claim, you're actually somehow providing proof that someone else says that this particular statement is true. So a verifiable claim, it can be independently verified. So the proof doesn't necessarily come with the credential comes with how you go get the proof to say that this credential is true. But then you go ask someone else, is this thing true? It says here, it says proof, but it's not proof, it's actually where to get the proof. So it's data plus a digital signature. And then the independent verification. So if you give me a credential, you're independently verifying it. And there's 2 phases to this. One of is, do I trust, is it properly digitally signed? And is that digital signature of someone I trust? And then, do I understand what the data is that's in the verifiable claim? And I'll talk about C4 in a minute, but standardizing that data is really the core thrust we're doing now. And we're working with a number of Canadian companies who are interested, and technologists who are interested in this space. And there'll be a link there if you're interested in participating or criticizing or joining our Slack. So a lot of the initiatives out there now are all blockchain based type things. I am not a blockchain person. And so we've created a system. Now this doesn't, just to make sure this is clear, is that the payload, the claim process is one standard, but we're also proposing something else, which is a web process of how you go verify a claim. But basically it's just a URL that you go to, or a URI. Issuing a claim. So I'm going to walk you through how it happens. So if you're a patient, you go to a clinic, for example, Shoppers Drug Mart, for a test. This will happen in the future, probably soon. I hope. And then they have a process they're already using that basically is creating data. Using that data, they issue a vaccination passport, which is simply a URL with a large random component, so it can't be guessed. And then that URL is delivered to the patient, or it can actually physically be mailed, a QR code, because this works well with paper processes. And then the patient receives the vaccination passport and stores it. And that can be stored as a bookmark on your phone. It can be put into Apple Wallet. We have a demo of that. It can be a piece of paper that you put in your wallet. We had these graphics done, so I had to show it to you. So the kind of things that we're trying to do to accelerate this process is we want to create no work for the doctor or clinician. And a lot of proposals out there are creating a lot of work for doctors and clinicians, and they don't need more work. I was talking to one, and I was getting some background information from a doctor, and he said it's 18-hour days still. No additional work created for the patient. It's like a receipt. It's like receiving a receipt. There is some additional work created for the clinic, but it's all IT backend, which we all love because we do that stuff. So that's the issuing of a claim. Now, once you have a claim, you have to do things with it. And so I'll give an example here. As you're a traveler and which was previously a patient, is entering an airport and wants to travel to, say, Newfoundland. And so if you don't have proof of vaccination, then you're going to go into quarantine for 14 days. So an officer, which in kind of the terminology of this is the validator, is he'll ask for proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. You show him your phone with a QR code, he scans it, and he gets an answer within a second. We have a video of this process. It's really quite slick. And that's not just, it checks the digital signature. It checks that the digital signature comes from an organization it trusts, and it trusts the data that, for example, if it was a test, that the test was done in the last 3 days. So it applies business rules. Oops, went backwards. There's a picture of a happy customer going to the store because we're now opening stuff. More graphics we have done. Verifying and validating a claim. No additional work, we've done, okay, so no additional work for the traveler. Less work is created for the officer because they don't have to, I'm gonna go a little bit quicker because I know I only have 15 minutes and I'm at 10 now. Less work is created for the officer. They only need to check the name of the traveler, and then they just get an answer of whether that traveler is their person or not. So they don't have to go look at a piece of paper and say, do I understand what this piece of paper is? They have a computer in front of them that gives them the answer. And efficiency is increased because this is happening within a second. And it's fraud proof. Unless someone commits fraud at the issuer level. But then you have a digital signature saying someone committed fraud. Terminology in this space, the patient traveler is the holder and the subject, the clinic is the issuer. This whole space has its own terminology. The clinic is the issuer and the passport officer is the verifier. Now I'm going to briefly go into how it works. At the 50,000 foot level is you create a public-private key pair, which I think we're mostly familiar with. And the public key usually would belong to a part of a certificate chain, which goes to some authority. So you make a claim and sign it with the private key. The private key has to be very carefully held. You publish claims as a semi-random URL, or actually as a random URL is what I meant to say. You verify claims using the public key, and you validate claims using the certificate chain to make sure you trust who issued it, and business logic, which is the rules. I accept this within 3 days. I accept this within 365 days. If you're under 5, you don't need one. Those are types of business rules. So this is I want to point at my screen, and I know that's not going to help you. It looks like this. You create a key pair. The private key is for you. The public key belongs to part of an official registry, or part of its certificate chain belongs to an official registry. When you sign a claim, you take your own private key, some data, and create a signed claim. In the validation process or the verification process, you take the signature plus the public key, which is pointed to by the signature, and you get a yes, no on whether it is verified. This is all incredibly standard X509 public key cryptography stuff. Once you know that it's verified, then you say, is it by someone I trust? And then you run business logic to say, does it follow my business rules? And then you can answer yes or no in the past. But this all happens in sub-second times. How it works, this is really, I know I'm going kind of a bit late here. how it works from business logic, we've come a system where claims are like, if you're familiar with MongoDB, is basically we're mirroring the Mongo how queries, so we can write queries to actually model business logic, and this works like magic. Endnotes, other possible uses, building permits, university credentials, professional credentials, ownership of our property and art, driver's license. You might see this by the end of the year in Ontario, but you know how things happen. Car license, officer identification. So if someone says they're a police officer, you could actually verify it. Proof of origin, KYC, banking and money transfer is a big thing. I'm not in that space, but it's a thing. Age of majority is, you know, buying booze or whatever. Roadblocks. Right now it's a Wild West standardization process. In fact, it's not even Wild West because no one's actually, it's more of a slowpoke standardization. There's a couple of large players, Microsoft and IATA, which are trying to take it over privately. But even the fundamentals of technology are not being decided on. As Canadians, we've created an organization, C4. What we're trying to do is very, very quickly come up with a schema and get past it. We're trying to say, be total Canadian bigots, and rather than waiting for the Americans to do something, is actually drive the process. So we're trying to come up with this and push it out to as many different companies as we can within Canada. You know, worldwide, we're sharing everything with everyone in the world, but we're saying if we can get it working here and show it working here, people will adopt this rather than waiting for whatever Microsoft does in 6 months' time. Another roadblock is technology enthusiasts. A lot of people, I had a different phrase here, but I took it out for various political reasons, but that they're using this as a springboard to bring other technologies that they'd like to see in place. Whereas I think this can be solved with a very simple process. Another roadblock, the last one's important, is that we're trying to establish a two-sided market, which is someone's issuing something and someone's validating something. So we have to get two different parties on board with a big sell. Once there's a couple of people on both sides, it becomes a much easier sell. I did this serverless slide, just because it's serverless, which is issuing claims. So you have a document, you're signing it. The most important thing, and why this would be dangerous in my public opinion, I know my personal opinion, is you really got to be careful with private keys. So having it out in some server where someone can just go sign a document and it has access to your private key could be very problematic. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I'm saying you got to be very careful with it. In the validating claims, this is very well suited for this application, which is literally, here's a URL, go do a whole bunch of things to it, right? That's a fantastic application for serverless. I'll make these slides available. I'll send the email out or something. But the screen here has the CCC4, and it's basically just my email and, you know, some blurb. There's a demo where you can actually try this at passport.consensus.com. Everything that's there on that demo is open source, and everything I'm doing on public is published on Medium and is published on GitHub. And if you want to complain or compliment, there's my Twitter. So please connect. I'm happy to talk. And thank you.
Thank you. This was awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Questions? How can we help? Like, what do you want from us?
Spread the word. If you know companies that are interested in this type of technology, or you know technologists that are interested in this type of technology, we'd love to hear from them. You know, this thing, I've tried to reach out to the Creative Destruction Lab. They're doing things with a bunch of companies for accelerating tests. They are not responding to us. But if you point people at us, I think that is raising awareness as quickly as possible that something's happening and we want to make it happen, could make it happen. I'd rather, you know, I'm trying to avoid this passive, let's just see what happens. So if any way you can help them, of anyone who's interested in this technology, or anyone can help develop this technology, or anyone's smart about semantics, or about, if you're into crypto, we'd like to hear from you. If you're into web standards, we'd like to hear from you. That would be fantastic.
Cool. Any questions?
I had a quick one. I was wondering how, I guess, how Canadian is this? Is this something easily transplantable to other territories that might be looking for a similar solution?
It's not Canadian at all. It's actually designed to work across the it's Canadian that Canadians are doing it, but the specifications are the semantic web components are actually designed. It's all localized. It's all internationalized. It's designed to work because not every country, the EU, Canada, and United States are the ones I'm most familiar with, all have different ways of coding things like, COVID, vaccination names and things like that. The system's designed to work in all these different environments, whatever coding system. So if we were to go to China or to Singapore or to Japan, I'm just naming countries now, Russia, and they had their own standards, it would sit in there, it would fit in very easily, and it'd be very easily adapted with business rules and things like that, that it would work smoothly in those environments. Plus it'd work in their native languages. All that is handled within the system.
Thanks.
Plus, I love the fact that it has the option of being a low-tech thing that the end user actually carries. It could be a piece of paper with a QR code, which could be great for a lot of different environments as well.
Yeah, my in-laws would prefer that.
I think a lot of people are trying to create really complicated systems with apps and things like that. And my kind of rule of thumb when developing anything is every single interaction drops 80% of the people. And if you ask someone to install an app, it's probably dropping 95. I wrote over 100 apps in the tourism space. And getting people to install apps is a big ask, right? But paper, and Apple Wallet and whatever the Google equivalent is, I think that's an easier ask.
Cool.
David, I had a quick question. So you talked about decentralizing the data storage part. So can you talk about it a little bit? What are your plans, or do you have some system
to decentralize it?
Well, yeah. How are you storing the data?
Okay. So, we provide some reference models. So we have a software product that does it, but it can actually just work in terms of you can actually run it with Nginx and flat files if you want to, and then a back-end process that produces the signed documents. So it can be done if you have technologists on board and you don't want to buy it from anyone. We have all the reference code there just to pump out the documents and to secure it that way. We do preserve privacy in a lot of ways. Like, for example, if we were dealing with vaccination records, is the way that we would prefer to preserve the privacy is never have access to the data except for what's exactly needed to be presented. So even if there was a massive breach, the most they'd get is your name and the last 4 digits of your medical card and the day of the month you were born.
And from a at least US perspective, are you running into this coming under the HIPAA rules?
So we've kind of punted on that, saying because we actually plan to basically install software into medical organizations. So that it would be them that will be dealing with it. So we come to them and say, here's all the things that we're doing to preserve privacy. But then they will be handling the rule parts. Everyone has very complicated rules in these things. Medical is one of the, I always end up in these nightmare scenarios, but medical is a very nightmare scenario. And I think we have a good story. Like, it's really just proving all those claims I'm making here.
Absolutely. Great story. I mean, great work. I hope this goes far enough. I mean, yeah, anything to do with medical is really, really hard to get through.
Yeah.
So I hope, best of luck.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Thank you so much. So if there are no more questions, then we have Mike, last but not the least. And also, I think two of you should talk, David and Mike, because you will hear after Mike's talk that I think there is opportunities to help you. Plus, I was surprised that the last reInvent, this one virtual, Amazon started going deeper into healthcare space. So I'm sure, like, two Amazonians here know people who may need ideas from you and can pursue that. So just throwing ideas.
And David, just I have a friend who works for Google, and Google is also going a lot into healthcare. I will connect you with, and hopefully something comes out of it.
Well, that would be awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Oh my God, that's why I love these meetups, like networking and sharing ideas. We all grow.
No,
Getting into this.
kind of a system, right?
But you see, getting into Meetup, we didn't know what we're going to learn. It's like Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates, and you don't know what you're going to get next. So I'm excited about the next chocolate.
Expose yourself to randomness is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, Mike, take it away. Teach us something new. Like always.
Sure. Dave, you didn't know you were going to come here and have people fighting over it, did you? It's great. So are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, like I said before, I'm hitting cleanup here, so I'll keep it crisp and make sure we have some time to chat afterwards. First, again, just thanks, Daniel, Jonathan, for everything you guys have done over the last 3 years. Everybody really appreciates it. I hope you know that. And it's been great to be a part of it. To quickly intro myself to the people that don't know me. So my name is Mike Apted. I'm a former founder myself. My day job is working at AWS, and I work with startups there and the startup ecosystem in Canada. But I also do a lot of work with startups directly as a mentor through some of the programs, and love to talk about tech. It doesn't have to, in startups, doesn't have to be AWS focused. So if you ever have any questions about the ecosystem, and if you're struggling with any challenges, please don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to chat. Does not have to be specific to the day job. A couple things I wanted to amplify from the earlier talks. You know, Gareth, write less code, absolutely. Like, couldn't agree more. That would be what I would put on the poster. Kuds, automation, super critical. Also, amazing job, man. Like, really cool stuff that you've been doing and what you've learned in the process and the progress you've made. And Dave, you know, this is super weird, but I also won a medal in biathlon in 2004, and that's not the weirdest part. The weirdest part is we did that in Athens during the Summer Olympics. So anyway, you know, again, pure randomness. So I wanted to just like take this opportunity talking to you guys to do a little bit of reflection, talk about some of my personal journey with serverless, because we all have one, I think. You know, I think my first interaction with it is still fresh in my mind for some reason. It's not quite up to the same level as where were you when, you know, like a moon landing or a SpaceX rocket or something like that. But it was still pretty transformational, both for me and for the customers that I work with. We could quibble about like when serverless as a concept actually sort of came to be, but I think you know, the launch of Lambda in 2014 was probably a pretty big milestone that most of us would peg to. And I was actually working on a project for, I was a consultant at the time, and I was working on a project with a customer and needed to process an SQS queue, basically, or a queue at a highly variable rate, millions of messages per day, potentially, but at very unexpected bursts and intervals. And it sounded very much like, you know, a job for Lambda at the time. And my first experience with it was pretty rocky. If you remember what it was like back then, you know, no CloudWatch events, no step functions. Processing an SQS queue was a non-trivial task. You know, I was using or considering tools like the Unreliable Town Clock, which is like a public internet service for scheduling events. And, you know, it was awesome, but terrifying at the same time. And I actually, on that project, ended up giving up and going back to an Elastic Beanstalk worker pool. So I felt like I had failed. I felt like I was missing out on something cool, but I just couldn't get it to work the first time I tried to use it. So my first experience with serverless was bittersweet, I would say. But you know, I had no idea like the path that it was going to put us on from there. 2 years later, in 2016, I was actually building my first production grade, I would say, serverless MVP as a personal project using serverless framework, I believe. That got shelved when I got the job at AWS. So another member of the dustbin of side projects, sadly. But at that point, I recognized like what it was going to be and what it was going to become. This quote on the screen is from the launch of Lambda. So I just thought it was interesting because it's already in the language from one of the AWS tech advisors at the time, sort of analogizing it to startups, right? And like the capabilities and the powers that serverless was going to unlock. It was still, again, very rough, but I think that vision was clear from the beginning. So anyway, moving forward in time, In 2018, I joined the startup team at AWS. So I started with a commercial team, and I spent 2 years working with some of our larger customers in Canada. And when I made the move to startup in 2018, I was so excited because I was like, this is it. It's going to be like serverless all day. So all I'm going to do is help startups build on serverless. And I was really wrong. As I came to find out after that. So I was doing a little bit of research before this, and I looked back at 2018, and Daniel had an awesome talk at this meetup in 2018 about why adoption wasn't happening, and it resonates still to this day. So if you missed that one, go back and watch it because it was a great one. And it perfectly mirrored the challenges that I saw in that space when I joined. So I saw a lot of Ruby, I saw a lot of Django, I saw a lot of EC2, even barely, a lot of containers. And it was because developers and CTOs, who are often the same person in an early stage startup, you're the CTO because you're the only person that can code or thinks they can code or is willing to learn to code, whatever the option is, were reaching for things that were comfortable to them, right? And comfort meant speed, which is the most important thing you can have as a startup. There's a quote that's always stuck with me from Cindy Alvarez, who wrote Lean Customer Development or Lean Development. And she said, basically, to paraphrase, like speed or the ability to move faster than your competitors is the only sustainable competitive advantage. And I think that is true in a lot of ways. So I came to realize in 2018 that for startups, especially, the 0 to 1 challenge was still very, very hard with serverless. The customer I had at that time doing the most with serverless was actually a multinational. So they were doing the right thing, I think, at the time. They were focused on a reboot. They were getting ready to do like a flip of 90% old to 10% new to the other side of that equation, and had built an internal team, like a core Tiger team, to do that. Serverless first, containers if you have to, was kind of the flag that they marched under. But it still required the process and organization and like resources of a company like that to do it right at the time, which was pretty interesting. So despite the progress that was being made in the ecosystem then, and the tooling that was coming out, I think there was still a long way to go. But things were moving, right, at least. So we started to see best practices emerging. We started to see maturity in some of the tool sets. The integration capabilities started to increase. We saw the concept expand to other providers, right? So you could take a serverless mindset no matter where you were building, even if you wanted to bootstrap it yourself, which is a terrible idea, but you can do it if you want to. The 2018, I was sort of milling around looking for a quote that I thought captured that moment in time, and I found James's blog post, and he was saying, for genuine bootstrapping, the ability to build an infrastructure without spending a dime, the time is now. This was 3 years ago, right? This is amazingly powerful startups, but many haven't yet understood why. So prescient and aligned to what I was seeing in the field at the time, but optimism, right? So we move forward in time, and this happens. A lot changed very, very quickly. I was trying to find something good that happened in 2020 to talk about at the beginning, and I struck out. I couldn't find anything. So if you have anything positive that you want to send me, I'd love to see it. This, really forced some of the business drivers for serverless to top of mind for everybody. So it was no longer just about the technical stuff. The business drivers became paramount in the customers that I worked with. Everybody was super focused on cost optimization, right? How do we drill our variable cost down? Staff reduction started to force people to think about TCO in a different way. They had to either let management go or let the developers go, and then everyone else and the people that were left did all the jobs, right? So suddenly we're focused on a different type of velocity than we were before. So I think people talk about 2020 as being an accelerator or like a time compressor, and I completely agree with that description. Like, we have been jolted 5 to 10 years into the future, whether we like it or not, and I think at the end of it, there'll be some positives out of that in the serverless ecosystem. But it's been a very costly and painful ride to get there. So we see people focused now on understanding the advantages of things like non-functional requirements built in, not having to worry about reliability, scalability, and the alignment of business and product to the tech. I think that's one of the cooler things that I've sort of witnessed startups start to grasp at this point. Really clear visibility into where they're driving value in their application and where they're leaking value in their application, and the speed advantages, of course, it all brings. You know, it wasn't all negative too, right? Like some customers were facing an explosion in demand for their products in our new normal, and they were facing a different set of challenges, but with similar sort of desires. So, you know, I think as we look at the future, as we leave 2020 behind us, I want to say that I'm optimistic. I tried really hard not to use a corporate slide in this presentation, but I wanted to grab this one for a very specific reason, because I think it helps sort of like show the optimism that I have for the future of serverless and also for the future of startups. You know, the line between the different things that we call serverless is starting to blur even more. Some of the announcements, like the ability to ship containers as Lambda functions packages containers, Cloud Run in of itself, right? Like these capabilities are making it accessible to a much larger pool of people than it was before, and I think that's awesome. The challenges and the barriers are continuing to be torn down. It's getting cheaper, it's getting faster. The standard problems that existed before are being knocked down one by one by the cloud providers. So it's just getting better, right, out of the box by default. And I think the maturity of the frameworks in the ecosystem now has reached a tipping point. So whether it's, you know, the serverless framework, whether it's, you know, some of our other friends like serverlessstack.com, I'm just super happy to see that, well, I mean, honestly, that like the talk we saw today, that potential is there, right? For someone completely non-technical to build a product like that with these tools. And the journey starting today would be much easier than it was starting 2 years ago. So the other thing I've noticed, if you guys are sort of interested, the use cases, the variety of use cases for serverless has absolutely exploded with the integration like increase, right? The different services that are now easy to tie into it. So ML workloads, I'm working with startups on doing serverless ML inference to drive all the costs out of that part of their infrastructure. ETL, there's another serverless Toronto talk about ETL and serverless that was great that you should go check out. It's not just infra glue anymore. It's not just the core event-driven stuff that we used to see it be. So the thing on the slide I really wanted to call out that is crazy to me is the last bullet point. Over half of the new applications being built internally at Amazon are built on serverless. And the way we operate internally here is very much like, it's not a company with 1 million people in it. It's a company with like 100,000 startups in it. And if they are able to operate in that way, and we are having this level of success internally with the tooling, I think it bodes very, very well for the future state. So I'm optimistic, based on the companies that I've worked with over the last year, that some of them have even gone through the full life cycle. They were born native serverless. They went through like MVP, product market fit, growth, even some to acquisition. And those stories have been interesting too, more from the perspective of like proving to the acquirers that their cost structure is what they say that it is, because that people don't believe them, that their unit economics are so good built on serverless. And this is super inspiring to me, and hopefully like an example of things to come for everybody in the future. So I'm going to leave you with this.
Whoops, we lost your mic there, Mike.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, how about that?
Cutting in and out, I think.
Yeah, it's okay. So last we heard,
Give me one
what you're
sec.
going to leave us with.
Okay, is that, you can hear me again? Okay, cool, sorry about that. These are built for music enjoyment, apparently not teleconferencing. So when I'm not sitting at my keyboard, which is how I spend most of my time, I'm usually sitting on my bike or running, which I guess is the only time I'm not sitting. And one of the things I love about endurance sport is the opportunity to obsess over data, experimentation, quantified self, that kind of stuff, right? So there's this concept borrowed from pharmacology called the minimum effective dose. And minimum effective dose gets sort of used in exercise science, and the definition is pretty straightforward. The smallest dose that will produce the desired outcome. More is not always better. Your greatest challenge is often resisting the temptation to do more. So you got to remember that the ML, if you can find the MED, it delivers not only the best results, but it delivers it fastest and with the least amount of effort. So this quote, which, yes, correctly identified by someone being from the Petit Prince or the Little Prince, I think one of the top 5 selling books of all time, really captures that intersection between, you know, minimum effective dose, serverless, and startups. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. So let this be your North Star going forwards. I wish all of you, you know, good luck in 2021 and beyond. If you want to talk to us about an idea you're working on, please reach out. This is my quick plug for the Activate program. There's a direct to startup option now for $1,000 US in credits and developer support and a bunch of other perks. I'll put the URL in the chat, or you can always reach out if you have any questions about it, but you no longer have to be part of an accelerator or an incubator to participate, which is great. And I would ask the community basically to please reach out with any stories, any challenges. I always still want to better understand like the current state, like what are your blockers, if you have any, like what are the, you know, the things you wish were easier to do. And if there's anything again about just the ecosystem in general or life in a startup that you are struggling with or want to chat about, don't hesitate to reach out as well. So that's it. Thanks, Daniel, again for the option to be here tonight, and look forward to the, I don't know, the next 3 years. I think you're supposed to stay the same amount of time, right? So the next 3 years of Serverless Toronto.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. Well, questions for Mike?
Everyone wants the pizza, Daniel.
Yeah, no, my planet.
I'll put my contact info in the chat if you guys need to find it.
Thank
That's
you.
what it is.
So can you explain your role with Techstars? Like I know you're helping them. I like that side, but it's a mystery to me. Like what type of mentoring? And
yeah, sure. So I mean, through the you know, the day job itself, we do technical mentoring, right? So we try and bring some programming for the CTO or developer component of the program. It's most accelerators tend to be very, like, I would say, CEO focused, right? So they're focused around pitch decks and fundraising and demo day and stuff like that, which is great and is necessary. And we also offer support there through the BD side of the team and through some of us. But I do like the more generalized mentorship there, more like the, you know, the outside struggles or the non-specific technical struggles that some of the CTOs may have. So things like engineering culture, and how do you hire people that know more about what you're hiring them to do than you do? And when is the right time to do that? And how do you build a team the right way? Like, what does culture mean? And, you know, that sort of stuff. So those types of challenges, do some product stuff. You know, early stage startups, you can never get far away from product, or you shouldn't get far away from product, even on the technical side. I mean, product development, not like product creation. Yeah, it's really just an opportunity to like work with people that are either in their first pass at this, or maybe even in doing this for a while, and just have a specific set of questions that they feel they don't have answers to. So try and help them out with that. And I'm just one of, like, you know, that's the great thing about those programs, whether it's Techstars or Founder Institute or CDL or Mars or any of those programs, is they have constellations of hundreds of mentors, right? So it's more about the network effect, and can we find the right person to help this person with the problem that they have.
This is awesome. And since most of them are going to be using serverless technology, like, this is opportunity for you to bring more people to talk, to share. I'm sucker for This Is My Architecture videos on Amazon. And the guys you brought me last time, they were like that. I think Doors, there was a startup that was doing something in real estate. So I'm sure you know many of them are stages open for them. So
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to find lots of really cool customers to bring out and chat. And it's, you know, more fun in person, but we'll do it virtually for as long as we have to.
Hopefully next anniversary is going to be a real hybrid, probably, because we won't be able to have people at Rupak here, like if it was only offline. This is the first meetup he's really attending, and he's godfather of everything. Any other questions? We still have time, like not too much, but it's perfect. Like we can stay longer, like nothing stopping us to stay beyond 8. But like,
maybe the next generation of VR of meetups will have VR, so people remotely can actually be there walking around.
VR pizza, yum.
Yeah, okay, that might be pushing it. But.
That's funny.
I feel like even in VR, we're still going to have a giant pole in the middle of the room, though. I think that's a necessary condition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's funny. Guys, floor is yours. Anybody? We're done.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to say thank you to everyone. I'm suffering from Super Bowl, so I need to say goodbye. But thank you very much for having me, and hopefully you found something useful there, or at least I entertained you.
No, we did, definitely. Like, I really like what I learned tonight, and this is the beauty of bringing lots of brains together. Now I envy Techstars, all the people you see there. So bring our community closer to their community.
Yeah.
For David, is there a link we can access to read more about the protocol you discussed? I noticed there wasn't a link.
Yes, sir. Well, on the last slide,
Paste
if
it.
I wanted to share something with you guys, I don't have it ready to share right now, but if I was to get it, can I send it to the meetup group or something?
Send the slides to me. I will merge them as one big slide, upload to the slide share. But in the meantime, you can share the links here.
Okay, I don't have a link to share. Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, I can do
Because
that.
you
Okay.
can
Put your Medium page in the chat there, maybe.
Yeah,
if
I'm
otherwise,
going to do that.
we'll-
Let's see how we do this. There we go, little chat button, Google stuff. Here's a whole bunch of links coming.
And then
Done.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Guys, because you're shy talking like as a group here, there is a new feature I'm paying for this Google Meet. There is breakout rooms. You want to test it? Like, how many do we have? 26? I don't know. Let's try to.
I don't know if we want to test it when it's already 8 o'clock and we have Super Bowl hangover. But
I think someone wants to win a book.
I didn't say hangover.
Okay. So
I had a quick question.
Okay, let's do that. So you're right. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, Mike, I kind of play pseudo CTO for a small startup that I'm working with. So I'm going to connect with the CEO. And we are already on AWS, so it will be much easier. But it's more, I like the fact that the mentoring will really help her. She's definitely non-technical. Great idea she's trying to put up. So, yeah, I will connect you via LinkedIn. Obviously, I want to connect with you, and I didn't even know about AWS Activate, to be honest with you. So, really learned something new.
I mean, I share it for like the fact that it can go direct to startup now. It used to be a little bit more of a gated process. I mean, there are larger tiers. Like if you read the website, you'll see, if you're part of a, an accelerator like Y Combinator or something like that, the credit package is much larger. But, I think especially in a serverless landscape, $1,000 US is sufficient runway to validate whether you're wasting your time on that idea or not. Right. So, yeah, I think it's a great tool. I wish lots of people will take advantage of it.
Sure.
This is awesome.
I'll talk about it for sure.
It was really hard to find the right batch and apply and get approved, and then your idea sucks or COVID happens. Thank you.
Mike.
Yes.
This is Harold at Revalio, a small startup. Just any insights on the leadership change at Amazon, and what do you think the merits are about spinning AWS off of its mothership?
So you're bringing the fire. You're asking me two questions that can both independently get me into a lot of trouble if I answer them correctly.
Why not? If I don't ask,
I can
would
cut
say,
out the answer if you want.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I'd love to discuss those long form one-on-one, but I would just say I'm excited for Andy. He was the originator of AWS in 2006. So I think it's great for him. I'm sad to lose him or lose him higher into the org. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any inside info to share. And I'll keep my personal opinions on that to a one-on-one conversation, if that's all right.
Got it. That's fair. Thanks.
Next question. Next question. I only see 30 names in the survey, so I posted the link again for people who came late. They did not see the link.
Yeah, Daniel, I kept my name out of the book contest.
Yeah, you win enough.
So, Mike, I had another question. So you mentioned that internally you use a lot of the whole startup mentality, right? I knew about that, but are you guys writing about it, or are you guys talking about how not only dog fooding, but how the whole startup culture is actually working and how they're interacting? I mean, AWS is a huge beast.
Yeah.
How is it actually working? Is there anything I can read?
Yeah, so I'll track down the links and find a way to share them. Maybe Daniel can share them post hoc to everybody. But there are some public-facing talks around a couple of things that might be interesting to you. One is I think we call it culture of innovation, but it's really about like process and culture, and because it's a common question, right? Like we heavily rely on downloading responsibility to the edges of the tree, and people are like, "There's no way that would work at scale." Like, how can you trust people that far from the center of the organization? But it does work, and it works, for a set of reasons. So there's a pretty good talk about that. On the more technical side, like it's a blend of culture and tech. There's a bunch of posts up in what's called the AWS Builders Library, and they're long-form essays written by principal engineers, typically, about the way we think about certain things or the way we do things. Some are very technical, some are more culture-oriented, and a lot of them are really cool reads. If you're a math nerd, the Colm's talk about shuffle sharding is really, really cool, and how you drive super high reliability out of what looks like a magic trick, basically, of math. And then there are a bunch of other, really interesting talks around those. And then the great thing about them, of course, is they're all first principle based, right? They apply to anything. You can use them anywhere. So they're really, really great resources.
Mike, please share those, because I was impressed with that as well.
Right.
So what happened, you started something, we did not know about that culture, 100,000 startups, and it resonates. But the problem is with everything, with every religion, with Agile, we have Scrum preachers changing and twisting it. So lots of Amazon partners are claiming they copy your culture, but they become sweatshops. And it's nothing what you're talking about. So speak up and enlighten us. Send me the links. I'll post all the links with the recording and the slides.
Right. So Mike, the tech part is good because I kind of follow the tech, and I've read several articles on the Builders Library. I was more interested in when you talk about startup within a big company like AWS. How do you form teams? How do you budget? Is it still a bootstrap startup? Do you have cost centers? Do you that kind of a thing? I mean, not getting into too much internal details,
Yep.
but taking a startup which is outside, like a conventional startup, how do you compare it with a small team inside AWS? Would be a fascinating read, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, the super high level answer to that question is that there's a similar sort of mechanism to the ecosystem here, and that if anyone can have an idea and anyone can bring that idea forward, but there's a process and a structure to do that. You've probably heard about the culture of writing inside of the company, and it's very much accurate, right? So you need to crystallize your idea into a one-page at the start document that and this is the hardest part about a startup, right? Raising, especially if you're trying to raise money, is can I clearly communicate my idea to the point where people hear it and they're either fascinated and want to know more, or they're the who and the opportunity and the addressable market are so obvious that they're just interested right away. If you're not coming off of reputation, founder reputation. So that sort of mechanism to bubble up a sort of meritocracy of ideas that is sort of, I mean, we could argue whether it's practically represented in the VC and angel world, but something similar to those lines. But then, you will leave your job doing whatever it is you're doing and go to become essentially a product manager, and you'll build a team and you'll argue for and receive some sort of budget for it, and and then you'll go do it, and that's it. It's that simple. And then you sort of stand on the results and the success of what you're working on.
Cool. Something like Honeycode, which came out recently, probably was a thing like that, right? So it just came up. Somebody just had an idea, and they just
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like the things come either purely internally, like there's a lot of stuff that has been productized. So we've taken internal, like a lot of the DevOps tools and builder experience stuff is stuff that came from the internal mechanisms and was productized, or the other, or stuff that has come externally via ideas like that. Like, hey, this is, I think, something that would resonate for a certain set of customers. This is the problem that it solves for them, right? This is why they can't live without it. Like all those questions are the same questions you would ask an early stage startup.
Awesome, cool. Thank you.
You mentioned Honeycomb. Like we did have them as a guest, both ladies, Liz and Charity. So the recording sucked. Like we did not record it properly. But there is slide deck over 200 slides, and we're going to have them again before the book is released. So it was not accidental.
You're talking about two different things, I think. Rupak was talking about Honeycode, CODE.
Oh, sorry, Honeycomb. I thought.
Yeah, no code.
And, low code or no code, and
sorry,
Daniel, you're talking about honeycomb.io, which is a separate ball of wax. But Liz and Charity are awesome.
Yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, I've been following them for a while. Right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, but I mean that's cool. Awesome. Thank you.
So I did a couple more names into the wheels of name. Like you keep asking, chatting while I share the screen.
Awesome. Yeah, and Serge shared some of the more science-focused stuff in the chat as well from Amazon. So some of the, I'm guessing you'll see articles from like Alexa and from other teams like that in there.
I lost you, Mike.
I stopped talking.
No, keep talking. There is.
I thought something exciting was about to happen when you started sharing your screen. So it is. See, something exciting is about to happen.
Let's see. I want to see everybody. Oh, it's now blurring. How do I make it smaller? Like this? No. What's happening?
There we go.
Okay.
That's good.
It's okay. So, is anybody's name missing here?
You should take mine out, I think, if that's me,
Why?
Mike A.
Yeah, that's what I put in. Why? You deserve to win something. Manning is. They have. It's not just books. It's also courses. There is always something to learn with them.
Yeah, I don't see my name in there.
Okay. Cool. This.
If they ship to South Africa, I won't say no.
It's ebooks. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Anybody else? So let's see. Ta-da! Spin. You have to be here. Sina, you're here. Sina, I saw you. I saw you here. Are you here?
Don't think so. I'm looking at the list.
Because you see what happens with the survey. I have no ways of reaching anybody. Okay, where's the survey? So this was the results of the survey. I have no emails. So if you're not here, there is no way for me to give you a prize. So Sina, if you're not here, I'm doing it again. Okay, guys, more for you. Sina, you're out. Michelle, Michael?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Lovely. You were quiet. Say hi. And then send me. So I'll stop sharing. And send me your email address. It has to be the same email address you use for Manning website. So manning.com.
Okay. I will just type on the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Perfect. So anything else, folks? We are past 8. It's really good to see everybody. I can't wait to post the recording. I guess this is going to be a gift to the world.
And I think it's a lot past 8 for Gareth.
What time? Tell us. 3 a.m.?
It's time for breakfast.
Yeah, soon. Yeah. Well, the kids will be waking up in about an hour, so that's good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in person soon, hopefully. And
we all hope so. Yeah.
Knock on the wood.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you, everyone.
Stay safe.
Have a good night.
Guys, bye.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
guys.
Bye.
4 years, Daniel.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.